Right, good morning, everyone. Apologies that we are a couple of minutes late. First of all, I just want to start by welcoming Alison, that's correct, isn't it? Yes, who is obviously joining us as our interim Section 151 officer. So welcome and thank you. And we look forward to working with you. The first item on the agenda is to receive apologies for absence, and I don't think we've got any. Oh, we do. Sorry, we've got Nigel Dixon. Unfortunately, can't make it today, but no standing members of the committee. So, item 2 is the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of July. Were there any questions or points on the minutes? Okay, I wasn't present. Is there someone that can propose?
Sorry, I was there, I believe, but I don't seem to be actually. I'm not listed as being present. I know I'm actually there because I'm actually written down as saying something, but I'm not actually listed as being present. Sorry.
Well,
and I'm happy to propose. All
right, brilliant. And seconded by Andrew. Okay, and I presume we're happy to accept. So all everyone in favour, I presume. Okay, I don't believe we have any members of the public or public statements. Item 4, we do have an item of urgent business, and that is the business rate pool. Who is introducing that?
I think Alison will be easiest to introduce that, Chair.
Okay, brilliant, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this has been brought to you as an urgent item due to the short time frame that we have available to respond to the department that runs this. Their deadline is the 22nd of September. And we only received the invitation in August. So it reviews the opportunity to continue the business rates pool that we're currently in for the next financial year. It's an in principle arrangement at the moment. We won't know for certain until the provisional local government finance settlement, which will be November, December time, we hope. The proposal is to remain in the pool. By remaining in the pool, the funds are retained in the Norfolk area to be reinvested in economic regeneration. And so on balance, we think that's the best proposal for the area. It shows in the report, paragraph 2.2, the money that we've received recently and are expected to receive this year if all goes to plan. And I'm happy to take any questions at all on it.
Well, to put it simply, I think it's a no-brainer. Are there any questions? That wasn't a hand, was it? No. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just, have in my mind, why did we receive such short notice for this? Why did it become an urgent question? Do we have any explanation for it that is obvious that I might be overlooking?
I'm afraid it is generally short notice each year. We get the invitation around this time of year, but actually last year we were given longer to respond. Last year we had until October. This year we've only been given to September. I don't know the reasons for that, I'm afraid, within the department. Sorry.
Anything else?
I just move the recommendations, Chairman.
Yeah, okay, I'll second them. And are we content to accept? Yeah, Brilliant. Declarations of interest, which is item 5. Sorry, Lucy, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, non-pecuniary, but I am the county councillor for North Walsham East with regards to item 14.
Okay, thank you. In respect of item 16, there it is. I just declare I did hear in correspondence from one of the 2 prospective tenants. No other declarations of interest? No. Okay, members' questions. Go ahead, John, if you want to ask a question now.
Yeah, well, it's not a question, Mr. Chairman. I just wondered if, just sat reading news items this morning, if we as a council, you as a cabinet, would acknowledge during this week where we've got green build on and the devastating floods that are going on in Pakistan, and that we could just show our support and sympathies for the people and the deaths that are going on there. So apologies for not giving anybody any notification of that, but I just wondered if we could consider that and maybe even consider a moment's silence for people that are losing their lives, not just in Pakistan, but through global warming events when we come to full council. Thank you,
You
Mr.
want to
Chairman.
consider that at full council? Okay.
Yeah, well,
that's fine.
if you, the cabinet, and that feel that that's
Yeah,
appropriate,
okay, sure.
we've had a lot this year with fires and floods and
Yeah.
devastation, and I think particularly there's this period where we do green build, that it's something that we could consider doing.
Yeah.
I'd just like to bring that to you.
Well, thank you for
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
for highlighting that, John. Yeah, I think very important. Of course, we do have green build this week. I managed to catch half of the talk yesterday with Chris Packham, of course. So please do attend those sessions yourself and in person if you can at the weekend. But I think you can remotely, or even on a Saturday, can't you? There's an ability to log in, and obviously, of course, promote the event to others. Nigel, I don't know if you wanted to say anything on that. You use your microphone.
Well, yeah, just to say that there are events going on through this week. It actually started on Sunday with a guided walk along the coast at West Runton, talking about the unique nature of the chalk reef there. Yesterday we had Chris Packham. It was a really good debate yesterday. There was a lot of interaction with the public, and Chris was his usual self. He was really animated. Yeah, and events all through the week, culminating with a live event at Fakenham, and thanks to Fakenham Town Council for allowing us to do that in the west of the district for a change.
Yes,
Thanks.
absolutely. Okay, no other questions, but thank you for drawing attention to that, John. And yeah, very sad what is happening in Pakistan, particularly at this time. Item 7, recommendations from the Cabinet Working Parties. First of all, Planning Policy and Built Heritage Working Party and their 15th of August meeting. Andrew, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, just to point out that I don't think the appraisal report is actually included in these papers, but it is available online as part of the Working Party agenda on the 15th of August for those who want to particularly look at it. Just to say that this is the second part of a 2-part appraisal in the Glaven Valley. We did the villages, 6 villages in May, and this is the second part which deals with the surrounding landscape in the Glaven Valley. I'd just like to mention that it's an extremely rare appraisal and a rare designation. There are very few rural conservation areas anywhere in the country. So we are slightly unique in preserving our heritage in the Glaven Valley. And to acknowledge that the team, the conservation and design team, have been working extremely hard, and Purcell have produced another impressive appraisal, which will go out to consultation shortly. And I have no hesitation in recommending the recommendation to the board.
Fantastic. Thank you, Andrew. Go ahead, Virginia.
Thank you, Chairman. I would just like to second this, and I'd also like to acknowledge the very hard work that has gone into these appraisals, and to say what a good thing it is. I think that the council has resumed doing conservation area appraisals. Thank you.
Yeah, really appreciate all the work that's quite a considerable, well, appreciably. So, the amount of information there. So please pass our thanks back. All that's been done.
Will do, Chair.
Okay, so and we've obviously got the recommendations there. We've got the Cabinet Working Party. Yeah, okay. So we can tend to accept the recommendations 1 and 2. I'll be happy to. Sorry, Christopher, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. If I may, you obviously mentioned the Cabinet Working Party projects update, and mentioned in there is the new Fakenham roundabout on the
We'll just come back to that. Sorry, Christopher.
Are we able to come back? Is that now, or is that? So I
Just
thought
in
you
a
were
second, we
recommending the
just
whole
need to
lot. So
deal with the recommendations. Sorry, I skipped past the recommendations. I'll come to you first though.
lovely, thank you.
So if we agree the recommendations 1 and 2 for the Planning Policy and Built Heritage Working Party, I'll be happy to propose.
Councillor Brown has proposed, Councillor Gay has
Seconded.
To go to the vote.
So, okay, so I presume we're all in favour. Apologies for that.
Thank you.
That was my fault. I'm sorry. Okay, item B, the Cabinet Working Party for projects. Obviously, considerable time ago, 18th of May. In terms of updates, well, I know the planning application was submitted for the Vicarage Road toilets, and tendering, I believe, is underway for that. Christopher, you wanted to ask about the Fakenham roundabout, if you want to go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I mean, I've been asking for some months now for updates from the planning department as to whether confirmation that the building of the roundabout will proceed over this winter period as it was originally scheduled. And I haven't been able to get, the reply I've got is that they don't actually know. They've been seeking confirmation that. Clearly subsequent to that, I was seeing correspondence from the chief executive giving an update on that, saying that actually it sounds like it potentially is in jeopardy for various reasons around cost escalation of the project. Obviously, the chief executive sent out various emails since then to people looking for alternative sources of funding. I just wonder if we could have an update on that, please.
I don't have an update beyond the emails that I circulated to local members about a week or 10 days ago. So the costs of the project have risen beyond the 2019 estimate that was prepared by independent consultants on behalf of Savills and Trinity College as the principal landowner of the site of £1.8 million, and that reflected costs of similar schemes undertaken by Norfolk County Council at that time. The costs now as prepared for the County Council, who has been agreed would deliver the scheme, have now escalated to £2.8 million at today's prices, with a 30% contingency, such that at the present time there isn't a full funding package in place for the project. I have written to County Council colleagues to see whether there is an opportunity for underspend from other projects that could allow the roundabout to be constructed during this autumn winter period, because the road, the A148 Fakenham bypass, does serve the North Norfolk coast in terms of visitor numbers. The County Council are reluctant to agree to summer working for that would involve traffic control measures. So they've very strongly advised that they would wish for any construction period to be from October to March of each year, and we are trying to deliver that window, but it would depend on whether the funding can be secured.
Do you have a date in mind where we get a definitive answer? Because we're saying we've got a, I believe it's 18-week window to build. you take 2 weeks out over Christmas where nothing much happens in this country. So you're looking at 20 weeks. So my calculation, if it needs to be built by the end of March, it means construction probably have to begin by the beginning of November. That's 2 months away from where we are at the moment. Looking at all the pre-planning that would be required in terms of plans, resources, materials secured. That's a lot to do in a short space of time if we still haven't got funding there. So at some point we're going to make a call to say, sorry, it's going to be delayed. Do we have a date for anything?
I think that's the position at the present time, Councillor Cushing. I don't have an update beyond the position I outlined to you. I think it was a week or 10 days ago. In terms of the council's project governance arrangements, we aren't able to press the button and indicate a commencement of a project which isn't fully funded. This is a complex project in that ordinarily such investment would be undertaken by the developer, but across Norfolk over a number of years, large scale residential or mixed use developments that have been included in local plans and indeed granted outline consent have often stalled because of the upfront investment that's required in enabling infrastructure. And because of that practice across the county, there has been funding for projects through the infrastructure fund and the business rate pool mechanism, which Alison Chubbuck has outlined to you in previous years. And that was the model that we were looking to fund this roundabout on the Fakenham bypass to open up the Fakenham urban extension of 900 homes and 7 hectares of new employment land, and protect an element of affordable housing in terms of the viability model. So if this was enabling investment to allow that to come forward, if that money isn't available through those mechanisms and a £900,000 contribution from this authority for a fully funded scheme, we would have to discuss again with the developer or landowner as to when this work can be undertaken. But I think it's an intent of this authority, subject to a full funding package being secured.
Just a deep concern. I accept the points that you've made in terms of around the finance. I just wonder when we might be in position. I mean, presumably at some point proposals are going to have to be drawn up to say how that funding may be secured from whatever sources it might be, and it could even include, I suppose, the council, or it could be those other pots of money that you're looking at. Do we have any views as to when that might come back to Cabinet for review?
So the email exchange you referred to a couple of weeks ago was prepared in response to a call from the County Council for projects which were at the stage of delivery, subject to having full funding packages in place, and where, because of cost inflation, there was some doubt about their immediate delivery. So we responded to that call within a matter of days. So if that funding package is in place, the necessary authority exists for the project to proceed without coming back to Cabinet. Obviously, the Cabinet working party for projects was around a gateway control, so that there was better oversight, scrutiny and challenge of project delivery. And we haven't met that threshold in respect of the Fakenham roundabout proposal, because at the moment it isn't fully funded. But if the fully funded package is there, if additional funding can be identified from the mechanism by which was outlined to partners in recent times, the project could proceed. But I don't have a timescale as to when that announcement might be made.
Recognise that obviously you're anxious to see that delivered, but obviously we will work as hard as we can to identify the additional funds necessary to enable this project.
But obviously, Councillor Cushing, you're the local ward member, so no decision will be taken or nothing will proceed without you being notified.
Absolutely.
But if there isn't a full funding package, I don't think we'll be in a position to press the button to go.
Yes.
I suppose that my concern is I have been asking for months. It's sort of clear to me, if I didn't get the answer in July, and you'd think these things take obviously time to prepare. if it wasn't clear in July that that was in place, then, you know, I think a red flag might have been raised a little bit earlier. That's the point I'd make on that.
I think it's, you know, regrettable we're seeing this level of inflation. I mean, clearly we've got to scrutinise, you know, the reasons why, and that was obviously discussed in the email as well. But we've, you know, we're obviously working from the situation where we are, and obviously we are keen to see this delivered as you are. So, you know, we'll keep you updated, Christopher, and hopefully in due course we'll have some news. Lucy, go ahead.
Thank you. It's again about the roundabout. Obviously, as district council members, we'll all know that we're frequently asked about highways matters. So it might be a little bit confusing to members of the public who are watching as to why we're discussing highways matters as district council. So just like a little bit more information for anybody watching at home that they can understand that further. The other question I wanted to ask was, you mentioned in the new quotation a 30% contingency. Can you recollect the contingency in the original quotation for the original project cost?
I don't have that level of detail to hand. I would need to, I'm not the project manager or senior responsible officer for that project. But I was involved in the conversations with partners a couple of weeks ago because of the senior project officer was on annual leave. So I'd need to go back and establish that information. In terms of your earlier question, obviously the district council is the local planning authority. We allocated the land at Fakenham for an urban extension going back a number of years. It's in the council's adopted local plan. The planning application in outline has come forward for that enabling infrastructure. So the roundabout, the principal estate road through the development, strategic drainage, strategic green infrastructure, reserving some land for a 2-form entry primary school, the principle of 900 new homes and 7 hectares of employment land. So it's in our interest in terms of our housing numbers for delivery to see that planning application, if you like, made live. But that is it's not a scheme that we are taking forward ourselves. It is a market development with some provision of affordable housing based on the viability assessment that was submitted with the planning application. So it's not a highway scheme in terms of managing the highway asset or the existing route network. This is work that is required to allow new land to be accessed for what is, in North Norfolk's context, a large scale development.
Okay. Any other questions on that or cabinet working party for projects? Oh, sorry, John, I didn't see you.
No, if I could just make a comment, because obviously I was involved earlier days with this. It just concerns me that if we can't get the funding elsewhere, that it's going to affect viability and affordable housing. That's a real concern, and I hope we can work as hard as we can to find funding from elsewhere to deliver this project. So thank you. Yeah.
Without, you know, losing affordable homes. So obviously, you know, for me, that is really the number one priority, that we deliver the affordable homes on the site. So that's something we would not want to see. Go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick question, please. On page 17 of the printed papers, the chairman asked whether a consultant had been appointed yet to assess the council's assets. This replied that the estates and assets strategic manager was leading on this, and she was liaising with to find a suitable qualified consultant. Do we know if that post has been appointed?
I don't know. I'd have to give a written answer to that, John.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay, are we happy to note other recommendations? So just back to the start. I think as such. So happy to note that. Item 8, recommendations from Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And first of all, the councillor call for action on the impact of second homes and holiday lets. Harry, I don't know if you wanted to say anything on this item or the next one. It was the next one, wasn't it?
Yes, Chairman, the next was why I'm here today,
Yeah.
but what I can say that we've got a further more information coming from the gentleman, the team that put the strategy together, the advice. Thank you.
Yeah, okay, absolutely. Thank you for that. So just get to the right page myself. Apologise. 19, thank you. So there are 6 recommendation and action there. Wendy, go ahead.
I'm really happy to note this. However, I'd like to hear what our guest speaker is going to say at the next overview and scrutiny before we vote on any recommendation. So would that be appropriate?
Yes, I think so. I think that's absolutely fine. John, go ahead. You indicated.
Yeah, thank you. As a person who seconded this, yeah, I think there's some good recommendations that have come out of that in terms of supporting what's in the regeneration and levelling up bill. However, we need to see if that's still going to go forward with the recent events.
Absolutely.
So there may be changes there. The part to do with town and parish councils, something that's come subsequently, and again, Professor Hilber may be able to help us with that, is that people have been saying about where we have our community charges, and there is the local tariff that goes on for parish and town councils, that actually if you've got 20% of your houses are second homes that aren't paying into that, then that amount, or that has not gone up, is being spread across a small number of houses. So I think there's still work to be done, and that was part of some of the recommendations here that say we need to decide what resource we can give to that as well, and whether that's going forward. So I think what Councillor Fredericks has said is a good move, is to hear what Professor Hilber's got. We can clarify more, understand from him, and that will give further discussion to enable you to firm up on further steps.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Absolutely. My biggest area of anxiety here is around the second recommendation in terms of the doubling of council tax on the second homes, and which authorities are the beneficiaries of that council tax. Because obviously, if unless there's some changes, it would predominantly go to the county council and the police. We, of course, as the housing and planning authority, we get, is it 8p in every pound? So surely with the authority that along perhaps side parish councils that are seeing the most pressures on their services, their communities, etc. So that's something I think that certainly requires further discussion, and perhaps using our position to lobby government to ensure that is done correctly. But if we wait for the briefing, which I believe is in diaries now, isn't it, with Professor Hilber? Okay, thank you for that. And the second part of this is the public convenience review and recommendations report. Harry, did you want to fire away?
Yes, thank you very much. I hope everybody's read the recommendations. This was a combination of 6 months, quite intensive work. I think that would be recognised by anybody who sat on the subcommittee. Some of these recommendations I believe, are fairly obvious and sensible. Some might be considered controversial, especially in regards to single-sex toilets. But the reasons for that is purely pragmatic and practical, and in no way tempered by modern mores. The final recommendation is also contentious regarding provision for travelling holiday homes, and the fact that they do cause certain inconvenience in our conveniences. I think this is a complicated thing, as wild camping is in fact illegal and is not something we should recommend. However, this is more in the breach than in the observance of. We do have the actual problem of travelling camper vans, wild camping to a certain extent, and then emptying their conveniences into the WC system, and this should not be allowed to continue. So it's how we address that. So I'll leave it there for now, and happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. We, of course, have a considerable investment program in public conveniences, which we should be, I think, proud of, rightly. We've done an awful lot of work, and intend to continue doing that. I recognise there was some controversy over the same-sex toilets provision. I'm aware we've had a complaint as well about that recently, and perhaps that's something that can be discussed again. In respect of the mobile homes and the emptying of cassettes, etc. Well, first of all, you said it might be controversial. I do, have concerns about the council meeting the cost for such provisions. I feel they should be borne by the users of those facilities. But as you've highlighted, we do have an existing problem at certain locations with facilities being blocked up, abused, etc. I believe Weybourne, Renton Road car park in Cromer, and perhaps other locations. So yes, happy to take on board all of these recommendations. Do members wish to say something, ask anything in response? Go ahead, Nigel.
Yeah, I'd just like to point out that there was a detailed paper came before council about public conveniences relatively recently, even earlier on this year. I'm not sure an independent review on the back of that, good piece of work that's already been done will add much value.
Yeah.
Standardization is something that's difficult because it's not my portfolio, this is just my ideas, but buildings are in different locations, they have different sizes, different modes of construction. I think when you say what standard, you have cubicles, you have sinks and urinals. I mean, that's pretty standard to me. I think the cleaning standards adopted by the cleaning standards adopted by Serco are standardised in actual fact across the district too. I am concerned as environmental portfolio holder about the disposal of camper van waste, which is actually a disgusting thing to do in North Norfolk. People come to enjoy this area. Some, instances of these campers putting emptying their cassettes into public drains, which run directly onto the beach and things like that is just wholly unacceptable. But how you enforce this in the middle of the night is very difficult for us. I understand that whilst we have a huge range of camping sites where proper arrangements of disposal of these wastes is permitted, I'm not sure many of these businesses are willing to just let people drive in and use them, even for a fee. So it's a difficult problem to resolve, in my view. Possibly needs some more consideration going forward. One suggestion perhaps was that they possibly use the site just across the road here at Cromer and the Gypsy Caravan, the Travellers Caravan Park, where disposal of that waste is acceptable. But I think this is something that we need to consider a bit further. I don't think just providing waste facilities across the district is the correct answer, personally. I think these people should have some responsibility themselves when they buy a vehicle like this, that they make their own provision for proper disposal of their wastes. Thanks.
Harry, you wanted to come back?
Yes, indeed. I tend to agree with last speaker, but I would just point out there's added environmental problems regarding this, in as much as the chemical used in these these contraptions, these whatever, is harmful to the biology that deals with human waste in our sewage disposal areas. And as such, when I brought this to Anglia Water to ask if they could provide any cure for this, is that sort of in horror, because it's considered dangerous chemical waste. So it's not an easy problem to resolve.
So just to clarify, there's a chemical put into the cassettes, and it prevents or somehow hinders the breakdown of the waste at the water recycling facilities.
In large amounts, it will kill the bacteria that consumes our waste.
Okay, interesting. Okay, I didn't know that. Thank you. Steve, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not a scientist. I thought I understood from Councillor Blathwaite's initial comments that we have provided an eco toilet at Weybourne, and that the process that you've described in terms of the emptying of mobile home toilet cassettes with chemicals does disturb the balance of that toilet, such that it doesn't work. The natural process of breakdown of waste is not effective by large volumes of chemicals within that operating process. I wasn't aware that Anglian Water had the same concerns, because you can dispose of chemical waste in chemical disposal units on campsites, and it was my understanding that a number of those did enter into the public sewage system. The issue that we have with disposal of or emptying of cassettes in public toilets is that public toilets are not designed for bulk waste, so they don't, the content doesn't flush away very easily, and so we've had an increased number of blockages, requirements for the facility to be locked, and for our own staff and or contractors to address those blockages. And although your property services team do work 7 days a week and throughout the year, a toilet block might have to be taken offline for general public use because people have used that for the disposal of bulk human toilet waste. And so that, I think, is the issue. There's a number of issues here raised by that practice. A very, very small number are using open water courses, and that has caused concern to parish councils, particularly in the area of outstanding natural beauty. We have had issues at Weybourne, particularly in terms of the eco toilet that we had put in place there, which was based on the fact that there is not mains utilities at that remote beach car park, but there was a large number of people who did overnight fishing. It's on the North Norfolk coast path, and so a number of walkers were using that location. So we provided a toilet which we thought was fit for purpose at that location, and that, because it is a remote beach car park, it does seem to attract unauthorised wild camping, and people have emptied their toilet cassettes with increasing frequency at that location. And then there's the other issue which I've described. Many of our public car parks also have public conveniences on them, so it's not difficult for people to access those facilities. And we don't have the necessary enforcement resources to be everywhere at all times, but it has increased the cost. And so that's something that is a direct cost to the authority in terms of addressing those issues. and also provides an inconvenience to the wider public if we have a public car park near a beach that people can't use public toilet at the car park before they go to the beach or whatever because it's blocked and work is being undertaken there.
Okay, thank you, Steve. In respect of I believe it was the second recommendation, just double check. I don't understand that the county council provide any water waste recycling facilities at recycling centres. But I'm just curious to what extent the panel discussed privately run caravan parks, etc., as an option, where that might not really be feasible. There might be, for instance, recycling centres that aren't on mains, given their locations, etc. So just wonder if there's any discussion you had on what role the many campsites across the district have to play here potentially.
Yes, this was discussed. It's a fact that boatyards, for instance, have the facility for pump out. That waste, the pump out waste in a well-run boatyard is treated as chemical waste and is taken by tanker to a facility. So I hope that camping sites that have facilities would treat this waste in the same way, and that for that there should be a charge, as there are at boatyards. And the problem is, I think that if I was running a camping site and somebody was just coming on to dump their waste, I would feel a little bit peeved and might not facilitate a great welcome for them. So I think that's why the council might have to look to ourselves in some way to address this problem. I don't have any figures or even anecdotal about what's happened this summer, but I think that is the reason why perhaps a council has to address this rather than rely on private operators. Thank you.
Thank you. Richard, go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. I have worked with Steve on this, on talking about some of the areas on the area of North Natural Beauty, and we have contacted campsites to see if they would facilitate this service, even if charged. There was a negative response from the campsites.
Okay.
And similarly, there was a piece in the EDP recently talking about the welcome to North Norfolk for motorhomes, but asking for responsible usage. I had several letters to me saying, well, you don't seem to understand. We are not caravans. We don't go to a site for 5 days. This is part of our journey. And abroad, this is what we get. And we've pointed out to these people that it's illegal here. A station to treat this waste costs in excess of £10,000. And I don't think it's fair. People driving these quite expensive vehicles or hiring them at quite an expense should burden the local taxpayers of North Norfolk with the facility and cause damage to others. So it is a growing problem, but it's an expensive problem. But there seems to be very little give from the motorhome owners.
Okay. Yeah, but we've clearly got to deal with the problems we're having at our existing locations.
We have asked for evidence, and the evidence hasn't been as forthcoming as one would expect. It seems to be more apocryphal, and we have been working with the National Trust and parish councils on the coast to try and identify. But then you do have an interest where you might have overnight fishing competitions, and those people have the same needs, but seem to be more accepted than visitors.
Yeah, I mean, we have no way really of saying how prevalent this issue of fly tipping of this waste is, other than where we have clear evidence of it in our toilet facilities. So, you know, in other areas, it's very hard to say. I've got a few people that have indicated. So I've got, first of all, Steve Hems, then Lucy, Angie, and then John. So Steve, if you go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I was just going to share the information that Richard shared with you, which is that in terms of that first recommendation that we contact caravan sites, we've already done that piece of work earlier in the year. None of those caravan sites, and we made wide inquiries with everyone who had, from our understanding, waste disposal facilities for touring caravans on their site. None of those sites came back with a positive indication, even on a paid basis for disposal. But I think it's, I think we need to remember that the people who are wild camping, there are a lot of sites around our district that take caravans on a paid basis. These people are wild camping when they could stay on sites on a paid basis. There is no indication that the same individuals would suddenly go to those sites in order to pay for waste disposal when the provision is effectively, from their perspective, free at some of our, by using our toilets inappropriately, or worst case still, feel it's appropriate to put it down a public drain. That isn't going to be resolved, or those individuals will not be resolved by providing paid for services at caravan sites, or caravan sites being willing to, even if they came forward and said they would do that.
I think that possible solution has been exhausted to a certain extent, unless anyone does come forward. Next speaker is Councillor Shines. Lucy, go ahead.
Thank you. I just want to pay tribute to actually Walcott Village, who have suffered quite dreadfully with some poor behaviour from a small number of motorhome owners. This is not all motorhome owners or users. This is a very small number. So despite there being a public toilet, which is one of our facilities across the road, there is a certain behaviour where people will choose to use the drain, which is next to where they've parked, despite local residents pointing out that that's a grey water drain. So I think there's a small little bit of education to do, because I don't believe that anybody that would use that drain would do so knowing it would end up on the beach. So perhaps we need to do a little bit of education, and I think Anglian Water should join us in trying to do that education across the district. This is not a problem that we can solve alone. But Walcott have been very vocal in trying to find solutions. And even when our public toilet has been used there, obviously we have to then empty it. It has caused issues. We have had tap breakages and such there. So I just want to acknowledge that whilst it seems that there isn't much of a solution at the moment, we're all trying to work together to get one. I just want you to sidestep a little bit onto public toilets, if that's okay. There are a number of recommendations in here, which I never thought I would say that I was going to be excited about public toilets as much as I am, with it sitting in my portfolio. But I would just like to thank the property services team for the work they've done keeping our facilities running over the summer, but also for the work they have done and will continue to do, which will meet some of these recommendations. The reviews of lighting, signage and energy efficiency is ongoing. We will have seen that at the new road facility, specifically in North Walsham, some additional adjustments have been made to signage since the refurbishment was undertaken, just to clarify each of the separate facilities there, which has been welcomed. We are making the move over to LED lighting, and we're going to aim to do that in all our facilities if we haven't done that so far. The need for the number 12, where we're talking about the self-contained cubicles, I'm not aware that moving forward we are going to have completely gender neutral facilities. That isn't something that we're looking to do, and especially in some of the new builds that we've got, that isn't wholly the case. The gender neutral facilities that we do tend to have, I think we've got one, is it on Sheringham?
That's correct.
In Sheringham, and that's purely to enable it to be quick and easy, so that we don't get one queue on one. It's not designed to be anything more than ease of use, because we do have other separate facilities within the town. The gender neutral facilities that we have created tend to be fully accessible anyway, so it's not anything above and beyond. They're just slightly lesser than our disabled accessible units. On recommendation 15, to look at the environmental impact, we are looking to weight our tenders based on what they're doing to mitigate environmental impact, specifically with carbon reduction, energy efficiency and water use. And we have begun that with our tender that's out currently for Vicarage Street in North Walsham. So our property services team are very keen to be energy efficient, because we are a green council, we're a climate change council, but also because it's good value for money, because it will save taxpayers money in the long run. So just wanted to assure and reassure members of the committee that property services are doing everything that they can do currently to meet many of these recommendations.
Thank you, Lucy. Steve, you want to come in?
So just to clarify the position with respect to gender neutral toilet provision. So as Councillor Shires has said, the council's portfolio of 39 public toilets is single sex male and female provision in all locations except for the Sheringham East Prom, which primarily serves the beach, and for convenience and recognising the lack of space for queuing there. They are self-contained units for single occupation without gender specification, but everywhere else there are male and female facilities and an accessible facility in the majority of locations. And then the authority is moving forward with its programme of changing places provision, one in each of the district's 7 principal towns initially. Where the authority is providing replacement facilities in terms of upgrading and providing changing place facilities. So at Stearman's Yard in Wells, Queen's Road in Fakenham, a new scheme proposed at Vicarage Street in North Walsham. We are looking at male and female provision, accessible provision, a changing place provision, sometimes a family room, so there's more space for access of a pushchair, so there's more space for baby changing in a contained unit, and we are looking at gender neutral provision, so 2 self-contained units that would be lockable, and that's for out of hours provision, because unfortunately our public toilets do suffer from vandalism and antisocial behaviour, such that we are not comfortable, and in terms of value for money, we place our assets at risk if we don't lock them overnight. But people will have an evening out, they might need to use a public toilet before they leave the district or leave the car park or whatever, and so in order to minimise the risk but also make available a service, we are looking at in those new build provisions 1 or 2 gender neutral facilities that would provide that 24/7 flexibility and resource without compromising the quality or the damage to the single sex male-female provision that is ordinarily provided. I hope that's helpful in clarifying the position.
Thank you. Angie, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to clarify, surface water drainage is actually the responsibility of Norfolk County Council. And where Walcott is concerned, I think they did actually put a contribution in to the non-return valves as part of the coast protection scheme. Obviously, as they're non-return valves, they would have to take a considerable amount of material before they opened onto the beach, which, if they are opening onto the beach, is seriously worrying. And I think we need to be discussing with County Highways about what they are going to do to stop this sort of thing, as well as us. Moving on slightly, I'm glad Councillor Kershaw mentioned AONBs, because as luck would have it, at the end of the month, Norfolk Coast Partnership, the AONB partnership, has actually got the wind-up session of their visitor pressures working group. So I think it would be quite appropriate if members agree that I take our concerns in respect of camper vans to that one, and I will endeavour to get a full report forwarded to it. Thank you.
Angie, I think you're very right to highlight there is a role for the county council here as well. So in most locations, in most coastal towns and villages, well, they would call them gullies, but the roadside drains do, of course, drain into the sea. A few of them go into the combined systems, don't they? They're doing Chroma and it's treated, but yeah, in most locations, it is, of course, the case is going to sea. So I think it's certainly something we need to consider going forward. I've got John. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll try and be brief, and thank you for allowing me to speak on this subject, which I no reason to be involved with. But I just thought, as someone who does a caravan and motorhome, these tanks last several days, these built-in tanks. But actually, I think Councillor Shires made the point, it may well be small numbers. It's been said it's anecdotal, we don't know. And I think that's the real point here, that there are thousands of these vehicles come to North Norfolk, and we may be putting a lot of time and resource into something which is unacceptable. I absolutely agree, it's unacceptable, but maybe just by some collaboration with county, some signposting to sites, some assistance with that, maybe that actually, you know, we could end up spending a lot of time on something that is just purely anecdotal at the moment, although obviously Councillor Shires has some evidence of it happening there. So I think that it struck me by the conversations that the perspective of it, we maybe need to get some information if we can on that. I have no idea how we do that, but
I agree. I think there is an element of this is anecdotal, but obviously we have the evidence of impact on certain public toilet facilities, particularly, and as you know, was it Councillor Stroud said that, you know, some members of the public have been challenged on disposing of waste into gullies. So I don't know in what frequency that's occurring, of course, but yes, it's fair to say we should blow the issue out of proportion. Harry, you've indicated.
Well, actually, I was going back to the officer's point regarding single sex toilets and lobby. I would just like to point out that on recommendation 9, we talk about the lobby, and the lobby of any toilet is a completely wasted space in which we spend money maintaining, cleaning, lighting, etc. And the use of single cubicles opening directly onto a well-lit road does avoid us having to have these lobbies, which can also be used for perhaps social discourse of a kind that we might not want to facilitate. So I understand we can put on a cubicle, it's easy to put gents or ladies on with a sign. So they don't have to be totally gender neutral, but also the technology we learned when we were doing this work does exist for automatic opening and closing or locking from a central point. And this would save the council a lot of money, which we spend at the moment. I forgot, actually, I'm sorry, I haven't got the exact figure here, but it's an astronomical amount just spent on unlocking and locking these toilets. Thank you.
Lucy, do you want to come in?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a point of clarification on that. Are you suggesting that each of the cubicles would have its own hand washing facility as well? Because at the moment the hand washing is in a communal space. And where I'm thinking about where we've got a facility where we have the cubicles, one row on the external wall and one row on the internal wall. The row on the internal wall, you haven't got an external exit for it apart from through the building. So would you mean that you would step out directly from the cubicle onto the pavement or into the car park rather than walking through? And are you also suggesting that the ones that are on an internal wall, we wouldn't be able to use because they wouldn't have an external access? Just so I'm thinking going forward, you know, thinking about the layout of the current buildings that we've got.
Yeah, we actually did put down that there should be a cost analysis done regarding this. But it would mean a hand washing, each cubicle would be self-contained. What we're also aware of is that using a public toilet should not be a punishment. It should be something that, though maybe not enjoyable, should be something that nobody fears. And the safer this can be and the cleaner it can be, I think is on the whole to the good. For instance, why do we always use black toilet seats? I don't know how many black toilet seats you have at home, but we could have white ones.
So that point is for dementia. People with dementia don't often differentiate colours. So in terms of the programme of refurbishment and significant upgrade the authority is undertaking, it has sought advice from a disability consultant, and that's why there's the panels, cubicle panels in the refurbished schemes are different colours to the doors, because otherwise somebody with dementia might become disorientated. And so I think we're moving away from black toilet seats to a dark blue toilet seat. And I don't, I'm not wishing to pass comment on the reason for that, but it is a different shade of. But I think historically, if you go, and I think the survey which somebody referred to earlier in terms of that management information, the council has essentially got 3 generations of public toilets, and is now taking forward a major investment plan in terms of further provision. But those 3 different styles of public toilets have different fittings. We're trying to make them more vandal resistant, and the amenity and comfort that you've described is trying to be addressed. So all of the issues around external high-level cisterns are being replaced with low-level cisterns that are boxed in. So the opportunity for vandalism by people swinging on them are all removed, and that the cleansing regime is easier in terms of spiders and cobwebs and all of those things, because you're right, it is that people want to be able to use those facilities in a safe way. It shouldn't be an intimidatory space. And I think that the male and female provision, in the majority of cases, I don't know which toilets the panel looked at, but the majority of our toilets do not have shared or communal lobby spaces. They do have external doors for male and female provision, often at either end of the building, for those issues of modesty and dignity. But that is more difficult in a seaside environment where many of these locations are provided. So all of those things, I believe, are being considered in terms of the investment programme that the authority is taking forward now. But some of our facilities do date from the 1970s or possibly before. And I think that's where our level of provision and standard is more difficult to maintain, and it's probably not ideal.
Okay, so Harry, do you want to come back?
Well, I was just going to say, well, thank you very much for that. And I appreciate the input. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got Virginia, and I think then we need to move to the recommendation. Sorry, Steve, did you want to just come in?
Virginia, just in terms of the automatic locking, it's something we have previously investigated with Serco. Serco obviously include the opening and locking of the toilets in the contract provision and sum. In terms of investment, I think there is an ability to look at investing in automatic locking. There is clearly a capital cost associated with that. The discussions I had with Serco were about them doing that activity on an investor save basis, because obviously we could invest and ask for a deduction in the cost of the contract. There were concerns, however, about the fact that automatically locking, so they will automatically locking on a time basis, etc., but they lock whether someone's in there or not. Now that's fine, because actually if someone's in there and it locks, there is an automatic ability to get out. But we do have a number of people who would then, there is a potential for people to remain in the toilet deliberately. And clearly there is no check then as to whether people are in there or have had a medical episode or anything like that. So I think there are some concerns that we would need to address in terms of automatic locking of toilets that go beyond purely the cost element of it. Thank you.
Virginia, go ahead.
Yes, forgive me, Chairman. I'm sure you'd love to wrap this up. I'd like to go back to something Lucy was saying about the common areas with basins and mirrors. I feel that I have to speak up here and say this, that sometimes those are extremely useful. You may want to just wash your hands. Some of us might want to just do something with our makeup, or there might be some kind of wardrobe malfunction you want to address. And frankly, that space is useful and means you're not in a cubicle, which is really quite small, and you're not using up a space that somebody else wants for something else. So, there are reasons to have that sort of design. That's all I'm saying. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, so if we consider the recommendations, I think we need to separate the mobile home provisions from the other recommendations, which I think we agree with. I think perhaps we would want to see a sort of web form of consultation for sort of feedback, I should say. That being the most practical way of doing that.
I would just like to add that perhaps it might be useful for property services to sit and meet with the panel to go through some of the things that we are doing. If the panel would be happy to meet with us.
I think if that can be facilitated, I'm sure that makes complete sense. I would say I'm not sure, and I think it was Nigel that brought it up, that we would agree to an external consultant to look at the facilities. I think we've given ourselves quite a critical appraisal around facilities before with the work that's been done previously, and I think there's other ways of doing that. But I think we need to maybe have another discussion later on about mobile home provisions. We need to obviously consider enforcement, paid for facilities. We don't think there's going to be the supply of any private sector provision on campsites, and potentially some discussion with the county council on advice in terms of the use of outflow gullies. Is that acceptable? Is an acceptable way to leave the recommendations in terms of mobile home provision? That we will obviously look at that. We clearly need to do a number of things. We do, of course, have the levelling up fund bid for Runton Road car park provisions, and it will be interesting to see where that takes us.
So, Chairman, if I may then, in terms of, I'm conscious that we need to move on, but this is an important issue for both overview and scrutiny, and our communities. I interpret from your comments that in respect of recommendations 1 and 2 on page 19 and 20 of your agenda, that you perhaps wish for a further piece of work to be done to consider the issues arising from wild camping, and that you'd like that to be brought back. I think if we are looking at a position before next summer, it would be helpful to come to a conclusion possibly in January, such that any recommendations or implementation might be made at a time, and that would allow for you to undertake some community engagement consultation with affected parishes or communities, possibly the county council. And then if it is around additional signage or enforcement, we can look at implementation up to the period of Easter next year, and then there'll be a clear policy and enforcement position in place, if that's what if I interpret the discussion correctly.
I think that's a consensus, isn't it?
Yeah. So in terms of recommendations 1 and 2, is that how you wish to proceed? In terms of the comment about the levelling up bid, recognising that many people in camper vans do use the Runton Road car park in Cromer because it doesn't have height restrictions and it is pretty accessible close to the town centre and amenities. The re-provision that is proposed of a visitor hub Orientation Hub, as part of that bid, has proposed the provision of a dedicated chemical waste disposal facility. So we would seek to make provision within the building in its design phase, rather than people emptying cassettes in a public toilet, traditional toilet pan. If you forgive me, it would be designed to accommodate or for that purpose. In terms of the subsequent high priority recommendations 3 to 7, I think you're saying that you're not supportive of a further independent, it's not an external audit, that has a different understanding around which
sure.
Alison Chubbard will be able to advise you further. So an internal, independent audit, you're not prepared to commit further district council or cabinet resource to that at the time, but you would wish that to be built on in terms of the management information that has previously been presented and shared. That can be expanded and deepened, but you don't want something that is a dedicated budget is set for. And then I think, picking up on Councillor Shire's comments, I think Councillor Shire's proposed that it might be appropriate for the panel or the scrutiny panel to meet for a further time and possibly discuss some of the operational issues with property services team, so that some of these other issues in the recommendations 3 through to 15 are better understood. Is that how you wish to proceed?
The cleansing service as well, in terms of, so all those partners. Sorry, all those departments that are involved in the public convenience provision and cleansing are involved in that panel.
Harry, do you just want to?
Yeah, that's a very good point by Steve Hempson. That did come up, that there is a necessity for, it's not just operations, it is also property and assets, and there needs to be some join up thinking between the departments. So it should be fully inclusive. Thank you.
Okay, I think that's understood. Wendy?
Just a quick one, because we need to move on. We could raise this at the Town and Parish Council Forum. It could be an item on there, so which would give us some information without actually paying a consultant to do it or doing it in-house.
Yeah, I think that's a worthy consideration. I think we can have that conversation, I'm sure. Yes, are we happy to move to the vote? Everything that was just said there. Are we all in favour? Yeah. Well, I proposed, seconded by Lucy, and we're all in favour. Thank you. So the outturn report. Sorry, Angie, go ahead.
Been going for a while, Mr. Chairman. Would it be appropriate to have a natural break?
Is that appropriate? Do members? Yeah, sure. Okay, that's fine. And perhaps if any officer here is in a bit of a rush, we can have a chat about order of agenda if required. But if you want a 5-minute break, that's fine. We'll start. everyone's back, but time's marching on a bit for some people. Okay. So the next item is the out-term report. Sorry, am I okay to go? Am I? Is that? So, yeah, thank you. The out-term report, item 9. So, Eric, did you want to lead on this? Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman. We have Alison Chubbuck and Jenny Carroll with us this morning if members have technical questions. Also, these papers will be going to overview and scrutiny and on to full council. So there will be plenty of opportunity for members to ask questions and to scrutinise. In looking at these financial papers, and there's a number which are in front of us this morning, the common theme is that this council has sound finances, they're well managed, and given the inflationary spiral that we're facing and the increased costs that we're having to deal with, this council is well placed to absorb those costs without having to make any cuts to its frontline services. So, strong finances, no cuts to its frontline services. That's what these reports are saying to us. Now, the out-turn report represents what actually happened for the financial year April 2021 to March 22, following the setting of the council's budget in February 21. It was a challenging time to set a budget as the country was still in the middle of the COVID pandemic, and what exactly the financial future would be was uncertain. I am therefore pleased to report that the accounts show for the 21-22 financial year an underspend or surplus of £615,700. It was not a year when the council had to dip into its reserves or cut services in order to balance its books. It reflects the strong financial position of the district council. As a council, we ended the financial year with financial reserves of 22.4 million, secured long-term investments of 32 million, no long-term borrowing with interest to pay on the debt, and our investment advisors, Arling Close, in March upgraded our financial strength from silver to the highest ranking of gold. More importantly, when I look back at my budget speech to Budget Council in February 21, our well-managed finances enabled the council to complete or start carrying out its major priorities for improving services and facilities. It ranged from opening the new leisure centre / swimming pool in Sheringham, continuation of the ambitious tree planting scheme, seafront chalet improvements in Sheringham and Cromer, purchase of more temporary housing to help residents in high housing need, and a start to the physical improvements to North Walsham Town Centre. These improvements to services and no cuts were also done with no increase in 21-22 in the district council's council tax. The operating underspend was driven by better than expected income from our car parks, where charges for 21-22 were again frozen, higher income from trade waste and recycle credits, and no interest payments on long-term borrowing for capital projects as this was not needed. In addition to this underspend, I'm also pleased to report that in 21-22, the council received a further £674,600 as our share from the Norfolk business rates pool for the previous financial year. This is available to be spent on economic growth and regeneration projects, and it's reported on page 27, paragraph F, and page 33, paragraph 4.6 in the outturn report. Cabinet members and Mr. Chairman, at a time when many other councils are struggling to maintain services following the COVID pandemic and now rising inflation, this district council, with its strong finances, is not making service cuts, but will weather the approaching storm this winter. In doing so, much thanks have to go to our finance officers, and in particular Jenny Carroll, for the work in helping to bring this about. I move the recommendation set out in paragraph 23.
Before we consider those recommendations further, we do have Alison, Jenny here. I don't know if either of you wanted to add anything to what Eric's just said, or if members have any questions. No. But thank you again. Well, I'm happy to second the recommendations then on that basis. Christopher, you have a question.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess the point I make is, before I go to my question, look at page 28, which is the overall summary on there. Actually, there's considerable volatility in a number of those estimates, and I appreciate they've landed on the right side, 615,000 on the surplus, but I would have concern looking at actually at the plan. The actuals are quite significant variances in a number of those cases, whether we really do have our finger on the pulse of what the estimates should be going forward. I suppose playing into that, and maybe at page 26, it mentions down there the pension provision, and I think it said it mentions 2.3 million current variation in or is spent on for pension costs. Do we know what the original estimate for those pension costs were and how much they've increased by? And I suppose subsequent to that, probably falls into the next agenda item, have those increased estimates been carried forward into the current year projections?
Thank you for your question, Christopher. Alison, are you able to take that?
Thank you. Yes, thank you for the question. Your first comment around the large variances, I think it's quite an unusual year, is what I would say, 21-22. The budget was set coming out of the COVID pandemic, so it was very different to a normal budget setting process. And then on top of that, we had various grants to distribute throughout the year that we weren't expecting. And as Councillor Seward has said, things like car parking, which were very difficult to estimate at the time when the budget was being set. In answer to your employee costs, this majority of the variance there is actually an accounting adjustment, and so the one there that's reflected is reversed out. So whilst it shows as a variance, it's not a true cash variance. It's one of those strange accounting notional adjustments. In terms of the actual cash pension costs, those are included in the budgets as a percentage of your salary costs and a deficit payment, and they don't vary very much year on year. Thank
you. Just one question from me. It might be one for Steve Hems, in fact. Recycling credit income has risen. Does that represent better recycling performance by residents, perhaps businesses, or a higher value of recycling?
Thank you, Chair, for the question. I'm afraid I'll have to revert to colleagues to get further detail on that and give you a written update, if that's okay.
We can speak off one, that's fine. Nigel, go ahead.
I was talking to somebody about this just recently, and if members might recall that about a year ago we changed, I think it was last October, November time, we changed the way we dealt with our waste recycling facility share of the budget, and we asked for them to go to a share of the actual fee, the gate fee that was received for recyclable goods. The market for those goods has risen quite significantly in the past year, along with lots of other things in this country, but it's to the benefit of this council. It was predicted that we'd get a better deal from signing that agreement, and this has borne this out as making a good decision on that at the time, along with I have to say all other Norfolk councils who are benefiting from this, but it's largely down to the cost of or the price received for recyclable products, and sadly not an increase in our residents' recycling rates.
Thank you. Wendy, go. Thank you, Nigel.
Sorry, this is a question probably for Mr. Hems. Are there the top sort of 3 items that are of highest value that we're recycling at the moment? I remember that cardboard was in demand.
I think it's fair to say that the volatility in the recycling market means that it's really difficult to answer that and give you a full picture. And also the highest value achieved per tonne may not be of significant quantities of collection. I know aluminium cans, at one point we were generating a significant income per tonne, but the amount that is collected of aluminium cans, relatively speaking to other waste, is low. And I think, you know, some of the issues that we've had in the past, where glass, for instance, has had little or no value, glass is currently, you know, has been having a value associated with it. What we tend to find is that across, as Councillor Lloyd has said, the income associated with the basket of material that we recycle from, what tends to happen is that as value drops off in terms of one commodity, it increases on another and overall balances it out. News are doing a very good job of actually achieving maximum income from the waste, the recyclable material that is collected from our residents. So, you know, it's hugely positive. I think in terms of recycling rates, you know, there's a real opportunity for everyone to play their part in maximising the material that is collected, and also in making sure that there is minimal amount of contamination going into our into our recyclate stream. So it's really important that we continue to remind residents, and that residents play that part in collecting as much of the good stuff as possible and putting none of the stuff that we can't recycle in. So we have you know, there's always some contamination goes in. We do particularly well as an authority generally, but I think it's probably something around about the 10 to 15% of our recyclate that's collected actually goes out of the back of the MRF as waste. So we want to push that down as low as possible. So we'll be doing some more activity in trying to remind residents what's recyclable and what's not. But yeah, thank you for your question. It's a very difficult one to answer, and it varies month on month. But we do get reports from news on a regular basis in terms of what they have collected and what proportion and what value that has attracted.
Thank you, Steve. Thank you for the questions. Are we happy to move on now? So the recommendations were proposed by Eric and seconded by myself. Everyone is in favour, presumably. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Unanimous. The following item is the budget monitoring report for period 4. Eric, is there something you wanted to say on this one?
Well, yes, this is the first budget monitoring report. It's projecting a surplus at the moment, or an underspend of 472,000 for the current year. That has mainly come about because of higher interest rates being received on our investments than was projected at the time the budget was set in February. I think the position will become clearer once we get the Budget Monitoring 2 report in another 3 months to 4 months' time as to exactly how things are panning out. But I do have to say there are inflationary pressures, and the current salary pay award is estimated to be nearly 6%. This council, like most councils, budgeted for a 2% increase, and therefore, as is set out in the papers, we could well have to find another £450,000. So again, that's any underspend could well be having to go to meet that increased payoff. The other two issues, one relates to the Munsley Road car park, the recommendation to release £30,000 from the asset management reserve. I commend that to the Cabinet. The surface of this car park is not, to put it mildly, meeting our standards of having a safe, secure and accessible place for users to park their vehicles and to use. And I would hope that the works to do this can be started in the autumn. And the second one is a recommendation for £130,000 to be released from the major repairs reserve to increase the project for the wall at the Fakenham Connect. This is a wall where it is listed. We are required to carry out the required repairs. The costs have escalated. To get these works done, they need to be done before the worst of the winter comes into being. And therefore, the quicker that we can get on with these works, the better. But again, this is another reminder of the spiralling inflationary costs that this council is facing. I move the recommendations 1 to 3, Chairman.
Okay. I think that refers to the famous crinkle crankle wall, didn't it? Okay, were there any other points on this item? No. Okay, so if are the recommendations proposed by yourself, Eric? Yeah, I'll seconded by Nigel. Are we all in favour? Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. So item 11 is the Treasury Management Annual Report, which you've already referred to in passing, Eric. I don't know if there's anything more you wanted to say on this item.
Very little, Chairman. The report is set out in the papers. And just to assure members that this council and its investment has no negative exposure to Russian or Belarus situation. So our investments are not at risk or exposed in that way. And that again reflects our strong financial position. So on that basis, I move the recommendations.
Okay, I will second that. Are there any questions? I neglected to ask that first. No, okay. Are we happy to accept all those in favour? That's unanimous again. Following item is the debt recovery, item 12 for 21-22. Eric, this has been your show so far.
Again, I simply move the recommendations. Sean Knight and his team do a wonderful job for this council in managing debt with all the other pressures that have come on to them, particularly during this period of distributing grants and more recently the council tax energy rebate, all of which impacts on their resources and their ability to progress some of the other work like debt recovery. But the report clearly sets out here what the position is, and I move the recommendation.
Okay, I will second that. Sorry, I neglected to ask again, were there any questions before I seconded? No. Okay, so all of those in favour, please. So it's unanimous again. Item 13 is managing performance for Q1. So I think in the circumstances, some impressive performance in terms of those housed, 80 households, I believe, and appreciable level of support by a housing options team. But I think it's also worth mentioning, perhaps it goes and said members do a lot to support people with housing needs, and thank you to those of you, and thanks to the rest of the councillors who do that. And it's a very challenging landscape for staff to be working with great demand and of course less supply. We know there's of course a lack of new affordable homes for various reasons, including nutrient neutrality. So again, it's a challenging position, but one within which I think we're still trying to perform as best we can. We've got the energy officer, of course, and do engage with her in respect of residents in your communities. And in terms of business and growth and sustainability, we've of course seen the submission of the levelling up bids. Impressive work within a short space of time, bringing many areas of the council really to in terms of the work they need to do to do the bids, but also property services, etc., who of course are very much involved, and estates. So it's been noted, of course, publicly that councils elsewhere are grappling with the inflated costs of phase one projects. We've of course answered a press inquiry about that. Customer focus, just to highlight again, I think the drop-in support sessions for Ukrainian refugees have been fantastic. It's been, obviously, I think it's fair to say it's drawing down a little bit now in terms of the number of those sessions. Very well received and successful, and shows again that this council is very adaptable to the circumstances. Of course, we've also had the first edition of the new Outlook magazine, which is worth noting. Lots of very positive feedback. I believe there were two negative bits of feedback, but I think in terms of all of the households that's been delivered to, that's very good, and I think it's really shown that the comms team are doing some fantastic work there to pull all that together from across the council. And of course, they're building content for the next edition, which I believe is November. Climate, coast and environment. John highlighted this at the beginning of the meeting, but of course it's Green Build this week. So just to again flag that. And quality of life, of course, we've got our blue flag beaches, and I suppose worth mentioning the Battle of the Beaches has just finished, hasn't it, yesterday? And congratulations, Mumsley. That's very nice to see. It's been mentioned, of course, earlier on, but we continue to deliver the most comprehensive investment strategy in public toilets, I think, in the county. So it's very good, and I think enough has been said already about our finances. So I think that sort of rounds up really what I wanted to say about managing performance. I don't know if anyone else wishes to say something. I've got Christopher indicating. Go ahead, Christopher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd try to bring it back to page 158 in terms of affordable homes. So I appreciate that those have been impacted by nutrient neutrality. There's rumour that may be put into abeyance with the installation of the effectively when the new Prime Minister comes into power. If that's removed, do we have any idea of how many homes that would effectively allow us to build if that goes away? And also, even if it doesn't go away, what forecast have we got for affordable homes that can be built?
Can you say that again? What cost?
What number of affordable homes could be built now, even if nutrient neutrality stays as it is?
Probably not information we've got to hand, but obviously, if you think of the Stalham applications, it's considerable. Wendy, go ahead.
Yeah, so it's really tricky at the moment because we're coming towards the end of our existing local plan. So all of the affordables that were on that plan have been built out as far as I've got Graham with me. So Graham's got a fantastic knowledge for numbers on this. So I'll let him speak to you on that. What I will say is that we, and as a housing strategy team, are meeting with our housing associations and asking them to pull out anything that they can think of that can be built now that's not in the nutrient neutrality zone. So we're really pushing hard for that. So I'm going to pass over to Graham to see if he's got any numbers for you.
Thank you.
I don't have the figures in front of me. I've just tried to call them up, and unfortunately they're not there. But from memory, and I'll confirm this, we're expecting delivery of only 40 affordable homes this year. The site in Stalham would have been would have delivered more. Unfortunately, that's fallen through. We've got a lot of sites, exceptions housing sites in the development pipeline, some with planning permission, some without planning permission, subject to nutrient neutrality. They will deliver affordable housing in the next few years, even without the new sites and the new local plan. But it is a struggle because we don't have a new plan adopted, and nutrient neutrality is affecting delivery on some sites at the moment.
Okay. Yeah. Andrew, go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to reiterate what Graham has just said. At the moment, there is a trend amongst the local authorities in the country, particularly the ones affected by nutrient neutrality, of which there are 72 in total, to postpone the completion of their local plans at the moment due to the uncertainties of nutrient neutrality. I'm not saying that is the position of this council. I'm rather hoping that it won't be, but just a word of caution. It might be one view that the next administration at Westminster may withdraw this or at least modify it, has got to be tempered by the fact that this is a European court ruling, and it will have consequences for the government and local authorities affected by government advice if it's not pursued to some kind of conclusion. But it's a significant impediment at the moment to the currency local plan making, and of course that will affect the delivery of affordable houses moving forward. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Okay, there being no further indications, I will propose the recommendation that we note this report and also actions taken by the CLT. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Yeah, all of those in favour? Yeah, that's unanimous, thank you. So we move on to item 14, the North Walsham Marketplace Improvement Scheme. Yeah, Richard, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. We brought this report before Cabinet to explain where we are with the High Street Active Zone project. Phase 1 is now completed, which is Church Approach, and ancillary to that, the bus turning station is now in place and working, proving very popular. This report is really to show transparency, in that we understand there will be disturbances in the use of Market Street, Market Squares as we proceed. The second phase is starting on the 12th of September. And the TRO is in place. Public information notices have been sent to 7,000 plus properties in North Walsham. And there's a secondary letter that's going to businesses to explain specifically how, if they need deliveries, how it can be run through a gatekeeper through Market Street, which is closed to through traffic. And just to confirm that the actual pavements outside the businesses will not be taken, they are being reused. So access to all the businesses will be maintained throughout the project. This will happen in stages. There's 2 stages which will affect access. The first stage, running up to Christmas, will mean access will be limited from Market Street, but there will be access from Church Street down for the accommodations in the Blue Bays. And this also is to point out that we are looking at, to help footfall, we are offering free car parking space in Vickery Street and Munsley Street to maintain footfall during this period. But we are pleased with where we are at the moment, and the project is funded through to the end of this for Market Place, and it's thanks to officers' diligence in January of buying materials ahead from quarrying at that point that we've actually saved quite a lot of money, and we haven't been as affected by inflation as other projects.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Okay. There being no other indications.
I'll second the chairman.
Yes, I was going to say if Richard is happy to propose the recommendation.
There is just one, I noticed that we've got Market street, rather marketplace than recommendation. So if we could just amend that. Thank you.
Brilliant.
I'm happy to propose that.
And seconded by Eric. And I presume all in favour? Yeah, okay, unanimous, thank you. So item 15 is the purchase of further temporary accommodation units. I believe this is number 17, is that right, Graham? Which is fantastic, and hopefully, well, we've seen, of course, continued demand, haven't we, for B&B usage, but it is saving the council money overall, giving people a good basis from which to go on and get further housing, a very stable position, in fact. Wendy, did you want to say something?
Thank you. Yes, this is our 17th property that we're buying for temporary accommodation. And as Tim says quite rightly, the normal process is that households will go into bed and breakfast, which is not only incredibly costly to the council, but it's incredibly disruptive to the families, in particular, having their children in different rooms. It's often out of district, having to find cooking facilities. So this is our 17th one. It's been drawing a lot of attention from the media. So thank you to Graham for doing the radio interview while I was on leave with Radio Norfolk on this. It is an important thing that we're doing. At the moment, we have 50 households in temporary accommodation, and we have 500 households approximately on our list for urgent housing. As you know, as a council, we don't hold our own housing stock. So this is a great leap forward that we're helping families in this way, and I'm very proud of the project. So I'd like to move this forward. Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. I've got Lucy and then Richard.
Thank you. This is one of the strands of work that we've done that I feel that we're all particularly proud of. Providing better temporary accommodation moves families away from living in a crisis situation, often sharing a room with no cooking facilities and no real washing facilities, into a space where they can rebuild and begin again. A fresh start is really important to our families who end up in temporary accommodation. We have seen increases in domestic abuse. We've seen a lot of increases in families having to separate and flee from domestic abuse. And in many of these situations, it is a parent and the children that leave the property. So having a home which is less disruptive to children in the district is massively important. It enables families to stay in communities for children to carry on attending their local schools, for people to really rebuild. So I'm extremely proud of this project overall. I'm delighted that this is going to be in Sheringham. And the reason that I'm particularly pleased is because most recently, having spoken to Councillor Liz Withington, who sadly can't be here today, she is seeing a rise in landlords evicting tenants because they're moving their properties into holiday accommodation. So we are seeing a slight rise there of people finding themselves in a homelessness situation with nowhere else to go. So I'm delighted that this authority is stepping up to bridge that gap.
Yeah, absolutely. Richard, go ahead.
I think it's worth noting that the work that Graham and Nikki have put in on these projects has been absolutely first rate. It's been timely, it's been economically sound, and just well done. It's really appreciated. Well, I'm happy to second this.
Brilliant. I do apologise, I've mislaid where the recommendations are. Can someone be able to read them? Would that be okay?
It's page 199.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, so the recommendations, the covenant note purchase. I believe that was proposed by Wendy, seconded, someone did say, Richard. And for there being no further indications, all of those in favour, it's unanimous again. Thank you, and thank you again. The next item is item 16, and that is property transaction at the collector's cabin in Cromer. So I'm very pleased to see this progressing. I don't remember it being open in my lifetime. So it's been hanging around a fair while.
Oh,
shall
there
we
you
say.
are. It's all about age, Ange.
And people have certainly questioned, the condition of the building being suitable for this let. But I think those of us that have been inside, etc., confirm it. It's suitable because it needs renovation, needs work, it needs connection to water, etc. But I thank Neil for the work, and to Renata and the team for all the work here. I appreciate it's sometimes difficult doing this and all sorts of fraught sort of conversations, etc. So I don't know if there's anything you wish to say further to the report, or indeed Eric, if there is from yourself.
Well, I'd just like to move the recommendation. I'd like this to be minuted. During the course of the marketing period, the council received 11 inquiries or viewings. As a result of the marketing process, the council received 2 financial proposals. These are contained in the cabinet report, and the one that is recommended was the one that was most financially advantageous to the council. There have been, as some members will be aware, concerns expressed from the unsuccessful party. But I am assured by officers who have relooked at the process that was followed, that due process was followed in marketing these premises and in recommending the preferred tenant to cabinet. So I'd like that to be minuted, please. On that basis, I move the recommendation.
Happy to second, just to again highlight that I did show an interest earlier on. I did hear from the party relevant to proposal 1. I suppose it's unusual for us as near local members to hear from those interested in properties. But I'm happy to second the recommendations that we approve. Proposal 2 is the most advantageous to the council. And are there any other indications anyone wants to speak? Okay, so all of those in favour, please. That's unanimous again. Thank you. Item 17 is the deed for underletting. This is the office accommodation. Is it Grove Lane in Holt? Is that correct? And Renata, I don't know if there's anything you want to say on this matter further to Eric, anything from yourself?
I just move the recommendation, Chairman.
Yeah, okay. And is that an indication, or you just wanted to second?
I have to second it.
Okay, brilliant. No other indications, I presume. So all of those in favour, please. That's unanimous again. Item 18, there's no reason for exclusion of the press and public, and there's no private business. So the meeting is closed at a few minutes past 12.